Woodland Park, Colorado, May 8, 2008. The last time anyone saw Joshua Maddux, he was walking barefoot down Meadow Lane. It was a warm afternoon, unusually quiet. Joshua, 18, was known for taking long walks through the woods. He played guitar, wrote short stories, smiled a lot. People described him as the calmest soul you'd ever meet. He told his sister, Kate, "I'm going to take a walk. I'll be back by dinner." He didn't take his phone. He didn't take a jacket. He never came back. At first, no one panicked. This was Joshua, spontaneous, peaceful, kind of a nature kid. His family figured he camped out, maybe got caught in a conversation somewhere in the woods. But by nightfall, something didn't feel right. By morning, his father had already filed a missing persons report. The police were sympathetic, but not urgent. No signs of foul play, they said. He probably left town. Teens do that. But Kate knew. He wasn't running away. He was drawn to something. Within 2 days, the woods around Woodland Park were filled with volunteers, police dogs, and drones. They found nothing. Not even a footprint. No torn clothes, no dropped belongings, no disturbed foliage. It was as if Joshua had stepped off the road and vanished. Then came the rumors. A whisper at first that some folks heard screams in the forest 2 nights after he disappeared. One neighbor said she saw a shadow move across her yard, slow and hunched. No one reported it officially, because the cabin nearby was still supposed to be empty. 2 blocks from Joshua's last known location stood an abandoned cabin, boarded up, silent, and never opened. It had been owned by a man named Phil Gribble, a once popular musician turned recluse. He moved away years earlier. The property hadn't been touched since. Teenagers dared each other to sneak inside, but most stayed away. Not because of danger, but because it felt off. One local boy, Jeremy, later confessed. "We tried breaking in when we were 13. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, I got this pressure in my chest like something was watching from inside. Not through the window. From the walls." On the 7th day of the search, Joshua's youngest sister, Ashley, found something in his room. It was a piece of paper folded and slipped under a drawer. A sketch. It showed a chimney, thin and crooked, with arms reaching out of it, one hand dragging fingernails down the brick. At the bottom, he had scribbled a single word. "Hollow." No one knew what it meant. They showed it to the police. They said it was just art. Joshua's case faded from public attention. The woods grew thicker, rumors stopped, and the cabin became just another piece of forgotten property. The Maddux family moved on, but never away. Kate said she always left a porch light on in case he came walking out of the trees again. Then, in August of 2015, 7 years later, the cabin was sold. And that's when it happened. The new owner was demolishing the old fireplace when something jammed the tools. They found a body in the chimney, wedged tightly, curled in a fetal position, knees to chest, shirtless, socks still on. It was Joshua Maddux. His remains were mummified, preserved from the mountain air and tight space. The coroner said he had no broken bones, no signs of a struggle, and his cause of death was officially ruled as accidental. He had, they said, crawled into the chimney headfirst from the roof and gotten stuck. But that wasn't possible. What didn't make sense? 1. The chimney was sealed from above. There was a heavy steel grate bolted to the top, rusted in place. No signs of tampering. 2. The fireplace had furniture pushed inside. A large wooden breakfast table had been shoved into the hearth, blocking the entrance from below. 3. Joshua's shoes were inside the house, next to the hearth, placed neatly side by side. 4. His shirt was folded on a nearby chair. The autopsy found no drugs, no injuries, and no signs of foul play. But the arrangement told a different story. He hadn't been running. He hadn't fallen. He had been put there. The police maintained he must have crawled down, for reasons unknown, maybe on a dare, maybe as a joke, and got stuck. But those who knew him, and even strangers, began asking, why would an intelligent, peaceful 18-year-old strip his shirt, fold it, place his shoes by the hearth, and then try to squeeze headfirst into a narrow brick chute in the middle of the night? How did no one smell anything for 7 years? And why was there no damage to the bricks, no sign of thrashing, panicking, fighting for air? Then something even stranger surfaced. A man named Andy, who'd been friends with Joshua in middle school, came forward online and claimed he once told Josh a story about a dream where a chimney breathed like a mouth and someone whispered from inside it. He said Joshua didn't laugh. He just asked, "What happens if you answer it?" Andy never forgot that, and he never told anyone until Joshua was found. 2 weeks after the discovery, a retired construction worker who had once helped renovate cabins in the area found something wedged in the baseboard of a different abandoned house 4 blocks from the chimney. A journal. Inside were 8 pages of writings signed JM. The last entry? There's something in the flue. It's not a tunnel. It's a throat. It called to me 3 nights in a row. On the 4th, I answered. On the last page of the journal, drawn in charcoal and slightly smeared, was a symbol. A spiral. And beneath it written in scratchy, uneven print. The chimney breathes. The cabin was always there, perched quietly at the end of a barely visible gravel path off Meadow Lane, its windows boarded from the inside, its chimney slumped and discolored like a rotting tooth. For most people in Woodland Park, it was nothing but background. But to those who grew up nearby, it was something else entirely. They called it the Silent Cabin. Because no matter how loud the woods around it got, wind, storms, birds, when you stood near it, the noise just dropped off. Like sound couldn't live near that place. May 2008, the week Joshua disappeared. Officer Gerald Stein was one of the first to walk that street during the initial search. He checked every shed, garage, tool shack. All but one. The Silent Cabin. He stood in front of it, shined his flashlight across the cracked siding, walked the porch once, then turned around. He'd later write in a personal memo. Didn't see any forced entry. Place was sealed up tight. But something about the chimney gave me the creeps. Looked too narrow, but wrong somehow. Like it wasn't supposed to be there. That note was never part of the official report. And Stein refused to speak about it after the body was found. In 2005, 3 years before Joshua vanished, the property had been sold at auction to a private buyer who immediately ordered it sealed. The buyer never lived in it, never rented it out, just bolted the doors, installed iron bars on the inside of the windows, and left. No power, no running water, no mail delivery. Neighbors said they never saw anyone come or go. Just the occasional truck at night dropping off supplies. Boards, paint, heavy-duty locks, and once a vent fan like one you'd find in a smokehouse. In 2009, 1 year after Joshua disappeared, a group of local teens tried to break in as part of a Halloween dare. 3 of them ran off after hearing what they later described as scraping metal and muffled coughing from the fireplace. But one stayed. His name was Owen Childress, and he was found the next morning curled up against the cabin door, eyes open, silent, refusing to speak. He didn't talk for 3 days. And when he finally did, he said just one thing. He's in the bricks. When authorities eventually entered the cabin in 2015 after the new owner found Joshua's body, they realized something strange. The interior fireplace was sealed. The flue was blocked by a thick metal plate, and the brick surrounding it had been reinforced from the outside. This wasn't a working chimney. It had been converted into something else. There were no footprints in the dust inside the cabin. No sign anyone had stepped near the hearth in years. Yet Joshua's body was inside the chimney, curled headfirst, past the grate, past the bricks, suspended in a space no one could explain. The breakfast table shoved into the hearth was wider than the fireplace opening. There were no scratches or drag marks on the wood, no signs it had been forced in. One investigator noted. It was as if the bricks expanded for a second and then closed again. He was laughed out of the report. But he also requested to be removed from the case the following day. A chimney technician named Eric Vallon was brought in to inspect the flue once Joshua's body had been removed. He was tasked with checking the structure for clues, confirming the alleged entry point. He lasted less than 10 minutes inside. When he emerged, he was shaking. "It's not a flue," he whispered. "It's not even a shaft." I dropped my scope inside and watched it fall 30 feet. But this place is a 1-story cabin. The chimney's maybe 12 feet tall. When asked what he meant, he said, "The inside goes deeper than the building. Way deeper." He quit the next day, moved to Arizona, left no forwarding address. Investigators noticed a strange patch of discoloration around the fireplace. At first, they assumed it was water damage or mold. But when tested, it came back as organic material, not quite blood, not quite rot. It was alive. Tiny spores embedded in the brick, a fungus not cataloged anywhere in U.S. biological databases. When samples were exposed to light, they formed a pattern. A spiral, microscopic, perfect. The same spiral drawn in Joshua's journal. The same spiral etched in the bark near the cut. When forensic analysts x-rayed the brick behind the sealed flue, they found something embedded inside. A metal object, thin and circular. They extracted it carefully. It was a dog tag. Not military, just stamped metal. On one side, JM. On the other, hollow inside. It was coated in the same fungus. And wrapped around it, tangled in old insulation, was a piece of Joshua's hair. The new cabin owner, the man who found the body, tried to burn the fireplace after demolition. He said he wanted to cleanse it. He stacked fresh logs, lit them with kerosene, and stood back. The fire roared for a few seconds, then turned blue. Then silent. Not crackling. Not smoking. Just silent blue flame swirling upward in a slow spiral. It burned for exactly 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Then died. And when he checked the ashes, there was no soot, no ash, just a handprint on the inside of the firebox. Upside down, on the wall above the fireplace, hidden under chipped paint, investigators found a small phrase carved into the drywall. Not with a knife, with a fingernail. It said, "It told me to come inside." The official report said Joshua had climbed in through the roof and become trapped. Case closed. But that theory fell apart under the most basic scrutiny, beginning with the chimney itself. The structure was old, built in the late 1950s, composed of layered brick and mortar, rising just above the cabin's pitched roof. But its interior was never wide enough for a grown adult to pass through, let alone crawl into headfirst, shirtless, and voluntarily. The flue was measured at 9 inches wide at its narrowest point, barely enough to fit a child. But Joshua's shoulders were 17 inches across. Even the coroner admitted. His posture is inconsistent with someone who became trapped during descent. He was curled in as if placed. There were no scratch marks above him. No clawing. No struggle. And no rational reason for why he would try to enter from the top of a chimney in the first place. Investigators examined the cabin's roof and found the metal grate over the chimney rusted shut, the bolts undisturbed for decades. There were no fingerprints, no signs of tampering. In short, Joshua could not have entered from the roof. Yet he was in the chimney. So the only possibilities were: 1. He entered from inside the house, impossible due to the sealed fireplace. 2. Someone placed him inside before sealing the hearth, but the cabin showed no signs of intrusion. 3. Or he didn't enter through the chimney at all. A forensic architecture team used ground-penetrating radar to map the interior structure of the fireplace. What they found made no sense. The interior flue shaft was longer than the exterior chimney. The measurements didn't align, almost as if space itself bent inward. One investigator, off record, said, "It's like the chimney isn't part of the cabin. Like it's part of something else, wearing the cabin like skin." The coroner estimated time of death at no later than 48 hours after Joshua went missing. But here's the catch. When the body was found 7 years later, it had not decomposed in a typical way. There was no insect activity, no bacterial bloom, no odor. Instead, his skin had dried, not rotted. His limbs were stiff, but not broken. Even his socks were intact. The mortuary tech handling the remains reportedly whispered to a colleague, "It's like time forgot about him." 1 year after Joshua's discovery, a former paranormal investigator from nearby Manitou Springs released a podcast episode claiming he had audio from inside the silent cabin. He said he planted a recorder under the porch in 2012, 3 years before the body was discovered. The file was distorted, but 2 things were unmistakable. 1. Breathing. Slow. Rhythmic. Wet. 2. A voice, faint, male, repeating the same line. It's deeper inside than out. The voice matched Joshua's speech patterns. Despite mounting inconsistencies, the local authorities closed the case. No investigation into how the body got in. No interest in the audio or journal. The final report read, "No evidence of homicide. Probable misadventure." Misadventure. As if Joshua had simply tripped and accidentally climbed into a chimney, waited in a fetal position without screaming, and died silently, all while leaving behind no evidence of how he got there. 2 weeks after the discovery, a woman named June Kepler, who lived 4 houses down, came forward anonymously to a local blog. She said she had seen Joshua, or someone who looked like him, weeks after he disappeared. It was just after 3 a.m. "I saw someone walking down Meadow Lane. Shirtless. Barefoot. Head tilted like it hurt to hold it up. He stopped in front of the cabin. And then he walked toward the wall. Not the door. The wall. And then he was just gone." She never reported it to police. "I didn't think it was real. I still don't. But it was." Kate, Joshua's sister, found a second notebook in an old moving box a month after the burial. Inside were several pencil drawings. All of them were of chimneys. Twisted, narrow, organic. But in one, just one, the chimney had eyes. Drawn high on the bricks, looking down. And inside the flue, something curled. Not a person. Something thin. Hungry. Waiting. On the back page, Joshua had written, "It doesn't burn. It doesn't breathe. It waits. And when you look up, it opens." The current cabin owner, after bulldozing most of the structure, tried to salvage a few bricks from the Fireplace foreclosure. When he returned days later to collect them, the bricks were gone. In their place, a new chimney, partially rebuilt. Still missing mortar. Still cold. But new bricks, clean, dry, as if laid just yesterday, stood in a spiral. In the center, someone had carved one phrase in wet cement. Back inside. No footprints. No tools. No fingerprints. Just that. When Kate visited the property for the first time after Joshua's funeral, she stood where the fireplace once stood. And for just a moment, she thought she heard knocking. 3 slow taps. From below her feet. The day after the knocking, Kate Maddux drove home in silence. She hadn't told anyone about it, not her father, not her therapist. The cabin was long gone. The foundation bulldozed. The ground salted and fenced off. But she still heard it. 3 knocks. Slow. Rhythmic. From beneath her feet. And what disturbed her most wasn't that the sound had come from underground. It was that she recognized the pattern. Joshua used to knock on her bedroom wall in 3s when he was scared as a kid. Always 3. No more. No less. 2 weeks later, a cardboard box arrived on her doorstep. No sender. No return address. Just her name. Inside, a bundle of newspaper clippings, a Polaroid photo, and a yellowed piece of notebook paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Joshua's. I heard someone else in here. He talks when I stop breathing. He says he's been here since '86. Says I'll go quiet too. Eventually. 1986, the missing boy. The name had been lost in time, buried under missing persons reports from across the state. But one of the articles in the box told his story. Lucas Jeremy Kessler, age 10, went missing in Woodland Park in October of 1986. Disappeared walking home from school. His jacket was found in a drainage pipe. No trace after that. Police blamed a mountain lion. But his mother swore he was still in town. I can feel him in the walls. I hear him breathing when it rains. They dismissed her. She was later institutionalized. But her words were eerily familiar to Kate. Before the musician Phil Gribble bought the cabin in the 1990s, it belonged to Harrison Kessler, Lucas's father. He inherited the land after a probate dispute and reportedly sealed off the chimney after Lucas vanished. Neighbors said he started acting strangely afterward. They reported seeing him talking to the hearth like it was answering him, sitting in front of the fireplace for hours, never blinking, digging in the woods at night. In 1988, Kessler was arrested after trespassing onto a neighbor's property and breaking into their chimney. When asked why he did it, he said, Lucas might have moved flues. He was never convicted. Just disappeared from town records the following year. In late 2016, a paranormal investigation team visited the site of the demolished cabin unofficially at night. They set up thermal cameras and EMF sensors. Most of the footage was uneventful until they picked up audio through a parabolic microphone. At exactly 3:14 a.m., a small, childlike voice whispered, "I'm stuck." He said I could leave if I showed him the next one. Then scratching. Not on the mic. On the inside of the case holding it. The team abandoned the session. One of them refused to speak publicly again. After collecting old maintenance records from the 1980s, Kate discovered a report from a contractor who'd attempted to install a pellet stove in the cabin. The man quit mid-project. His notes read, "Couldn't drill the flue. Kept hitting empty space. Echoed like there was more room than there should be. Got the feeling something was behind the brickwork, listening." He included a crude sketch of the chimney. But his drawing showed a second flue shaft, not in the blueprints. One that twisted downward. While sifting through the remaining bricks salvaged from the fireplace demolition, the current landowner noticed something on the underside of one. Etched in charcoal. A perfect spiral. Inside it, numbers 10/31/86. The day Lucas Kessler disappeared. When they examined other bricks, more dates appeared. Always Halloween. Always missing children from neighboring towns. One brick, larger than the rest, had no date. Only one word. Next, Kate found out that Lucas's bedroom in his original home had shared a wall with the chimney. And he, like Joshua, had reportedly drawn spirals over and over again before he disappeared. His mother tried to paint over them. They came back, in permanent marker. Even after the room was repainted, they reappeared at night. A local priest had once been called to bless the house. He refused after stepping inside. All he said was, "Something is using the flue." The last surviving floor plan of the original cabin showed a small crawl space behind the hearth never mentioned in public documents. Police never searched it. When Kate returned with a private team and asked permission to dig, they uncovered the space. Inside, a rusted, half-burned backpack, children's sneakers, one pair too small for Joshua, a strip of cloth with letters hand-sewn. L.K. But there was also a mirror, old, shattered, its silver flaking at the edges. And across the broken glass, in what appeared to be blood, someone had written, "He likes the ones who hear." Late that night, back at home, Kate sat in the dark, holding one of the bricks marked with Lucas's disappearance date. The spiral seemed deeper than before, almost like a tunnel. And then she heard it again, faint and clear. 3 knocks. From inside her bedroom wall. And this time, a voice followed. Young. Dry. Smiling. I showed him the next one. The floorboard in question wasn't loose. It didn't creak. It didn't sag. It was just colder. Kate had returned to the cabin's ruins, or rather, what was left of it. Most of the structure had been torn down, but some of the base remained, partially buried under soil, stone, and fire-charred debris. She had gone alone. She didn't tell her father. Didn't ask permission. She felt like if she explained it, it would lose its weight. And she needed to know. She wasn't just looking for answers anymore. She was looking for proof that she wasn't the next one. It was a flat slab of plywood, scorched but still intact, half buried where the living room once stood. When she stepped on it, the air dropped. The sun was up, but the wind died. The pine trees stood still. And for a moment, it felt like she was standing inside a sealed house, not outside. She dropped to her knees and pried the edge with a tire iron. It didn't splinter, it peeled upward. And underneath, a shallow space no deeper than a shoebox. Inside was a black, leather-bound book. The initials JM were carved into the cover, not written, carved. Inside, the pages were stuck together from moisture and ash. But as Kate peeled them apart carefully, she saw that the ink was intact. It wasn't a school notebook. It wasn't a sketch pad. It was a record. A slow descent. Each entry was more fragmented, less human. But the first few pages were unmistakably Joshua's voice. May 5th, 2008, something's different. The woods feel bigger than yesterday. Like they're breathing, like they're watching where I step. May 6th, I heard someone calling from the chimney today. Just a whisper. Not a name. A number, 314. I don't know what that means. May 7th, I dreamed about a mouth in the bricks. It was smiling, but there were no teeth. I woke up with ash on my fingers. As Kate read deeper, the entries grew harder to interpret. I went back. It opened again. The spiral spun without moving. I could smell the cold. He says I can stay if I'm quiet. But I miss the air. The real air. There's another boy here. He doesn't blink. He says he's hollow, but he still hums at night. He sleeps facing the wall. I forgot my last name for a minute. Tucked between the pages were several Polaroids, faded, smudged, but still visible. One showed the chimney from the inside, impossible unless Joshua had been inside with a camera. The bricks looked wet. Soft. Wrong. Another showed a handprint smeared in ash on a window pane. But the final photo, nearly blank, showed something else. A faint outline of 2 boys. One facing the camera, his eyes blacked out. The other facing away. Much smaller. Wearing an old 1980s backpack. At the bottom, someone had written, "Told you I'd bring the next." The final few pages were in a different handwriting. Sharper. Uneven. More like scratching than writing. The sentences repeated. "The flue is not a pipe. The flue is not a pipe. The flue is not a pipe." Then, underneath, in larger print, "Hollows feed through time. The spiral eats backward." The last page had only 2 words. Still here? That night, Kate sat in her bedroom with the journal on her lap. She didn't move for hours. Her phone was off. No signal. At exactly 3:14 a.m., it lit up. One new voicemail. The number was unlisted. The message was 5 seconds long. Joshua's voice. Breathless. "Hollow. Far away. He knows you found the book." Then something whispering too close to the mic. "She's next." Kate knew where she needed to go. The old Kessler house, where Lucas once lived, had long been condemned. Its roof had caved in. Weeds grew through the floorboards. But the chimney, that crooked, central monolith of soot and whispers, still stood. Kate stepped into what was once Lucas's bedroom. It was quiet except for the ticking of her watch. She knelt near the wall where the chimney passed behind. And just like that, 3 knocks. There was a small vent on the lower part of the wall, decorative, long sealed shut. Kate pried it open. Inside was darkness, and a folded piece of yellowed paper. It read, "I told him. He listens when it's quiet. He told me where the others are. He said the chimney runs deeper now. He said you'd come, and that you'd be loud. He doesn't like loud. At the bottom, a child's scrawl. Tell Joshua I said hi. Okay. That night, Kate tried to burn the journal. She soaked it in lighter fluid. Dropped a match. It hissed. Smoked. Then went cold. When she opened the book again, the pages were unburned. Except one. The middle page. On it, in fresh, wet ink. Don't shut the flue. We're still breathing. Before it was known as the Silent Cabin, before spirals showed up in brick and children disappeared through chimneys, it was just a quiet retreat in the Colorado woods. A small A-frame cabin, owned by a quiet man, Philip Gribble. To most, he was just a failed musician, a name that disappeared after one haunting folk album in the 1970s and a reputation for writing songs that made you feel watched. But Philip Gribble was more than just a reclusive artist. He was the last person to renovate the cabin before Joshua died in it. And his story didn't add up. In 1973, Gribble released a self-produced album called Echoes Through Hollow Walls. It barely sold. Critics called it unsettling, like the soundtrack to a bad dream. But one track stood out. Track 6, The Flue. An instrumental piece nearly 6 minutes long. Distorted acoustic guitar, faint breathing layered beneath. If reversed, you could hear what sounded like a child whispering. Open it from inside. Let me out. Decades later, internet deep dives uncovered rumors that the audio had been recorded inside the cabin. Gribble never denied it. In 1974, 1 year after his album's release, Gribble's younger brother, Evan, went missing. The official story, Evan went out for a walk, never came back, but buried in an old police report was a neighbor's statement. He was always afraid of the fireplace. Said it had eyes. Said his brother told him it could swallow him if he breathed too loud. Philip Gribble refused to cooperate with the investigation. He moved away 6 months later. To Colorado. Property records show Gribble purchased the Meadow Lane cabin in 1991 under a different name, G. Hollow, LLC. He told the realtor he was looking for a quiet place deep enough for sound. Over the next 2 years, he sealed the windows, reinforced the chimney, installed triple locks on the inside of the doors, removed the original hearth and had the flue custom fitted with copper mesh. When asked why, he allegedly said, "You don't want things coming down without warning." When the demolition crew began tearing down the cabin in 2015, they found a panel behind the master bedroom wall, sealed with varnish and screws. Inside was a mural, painted entirely in black and dark blue oil. It showed a cabin in the center, dozens of thin, faceless figures surrounding it, a spiral rising from the chimney like smoke, children looking out of the windows but their eyes were hollow. In the bottom corner, signed in red, PG 1992. In 2016, a podcaster tracked Gribble down in Oregon and conducted a recorded interview. Gribble looked frail, gaunt, like something had hollowed him from the inside. When asked about the cabin, he said, "I didn't build the spiral. I just uncovered it. It was already there under the house. Under the flue. It whispers. Not with words. With pressure. With hunger." When asked about Joshua, Gribble paused. Then, "I told them to stay away from the chimney. I locked it. But it doesn't care about locks." The podcast was uploaded, then mysteriously pulled within 12 hours. The host has not spoken publicly since. Police records obtained via FOIA Freedom of Information Act request revealed that in 1994, Gribble was detained for breaking into a neighbor's cabin. The report reads, "Subject found crouched inside the neighbor's chimney flue, covered in soot, repeating the phrase, 'They need air. They need names.'" He was released after a psychiatric evaluation. The incident was never prosecuted. A music collector uploaded high-res scans of Gribble's original lyric sheets for Echoes Through Hollow Walls. Scribbled in the margins of the flue, "Don't play the note at 3:14. It'll open again. It always opens when one listens long enough." Another margin near the bottom of the page, "Feed it silence, or feed it names." In 2020, after rumors of renewed investigation into Joshua Maddux's case, Gribble was visited by law enforcement at his Oregon residence. The next morning, he was gone. No signs of forced entry. The house still locked from the inside. In his bedroom, carved into the wooden headboard. Back through the flue. On the wall above his bed, drawn in charcoal. A spiral. In 2021, a second search of the Kessler crawlspace where Lucas had once lived revealed something strange tucked behind an old insulation panel. A broken guitar. Vintage 1970s. Inside the sound hole, someone had written, "It's still singing in the bricks." The guitar had a nameplate. property of P. Gribble. When Kate played The Flu backwards one last time, she heard something new. Not a voice. Not breathing. Knocking. Slow. Hollow. And under it, a single phrase whispered in a child's voice. He taught me the song. Now I can hum it too. When the new owners built their dream home on the old lot where the cabin once stood, they knew about the rumors. They'd read the news reports. They knew a boy had been found in the chimney. But they were skeptics. It's just stories, Mr. Dowell told the contractor. You can't be afraid of a house that isn't there anymore. They laid new concrete, leveled the foundation, poured fresh walls. No chimney, no fireplace. But still, at night, the house breathed. It started around 3:14 a.m. A soft pressure. The house seemed to exhale, not from the vents, not from the walls. From the center. From below. Mrs. Dowell woke up to the sound of wind moving under the floorboards even though the HVAC was off. In the baby monitor, their infant daughter had sat bolt upright, not crying, just staring at the corner. And from the monitor speaker came a sound like bricks shifting. Then 3 hollow knocks. The Dowells hired a local surveyor to confirm their new home's layout matched code. The man came back 2 days later, pale, with a question. Did you add a crawl space recently? No, Mr. Dowell replied. Why? There's a square void under your foundation. About 6 feet wide, 9 feet tall. That's impossible, he said. It's solid concrete down there. But the surveyor showed the scan. The void was real. It was shaped like a chimney. Mrs. Dowell began noticing fogged windows in the morning. Not unusual, except these were interior panes. The glass in the baby's room, the oven door, the microwave, each fogged from the inside. Once she walked past the bathroom mirror at dawn and saw condensation spelling. Hum. She wiped it away, turned back. The spiral was there, drawn in the steam with a fingertip. After 2 weeks of disturbances, the Dowells set up a recorder under the floor, hoping to catch whatever was causing the vibrations at night. The first night, silence. The second night, a soft hum, rising and falling like someone breathing through wet cloth. The third night, at 3:14 a.m., a voice. Joshua isn't done. Then something scraped across the microphone. Something dragging, followed by 3 short knocks. And finally, the whisper. It lives in the mortar. The baby began drawing. Scribbles at first, then spirals. Everywhere. On the floor in dry cereal. On steamed mirrors. On the inside of her crib rail, scratched with a toy spoon. She said only one thing when asked about them. It lives down the hot. No one knew what she meant, until they looked at an old map of the cabin's original chimney labeled in blue ink. Hot flue path. Unsafe for access. Kate visited the Dowells after they contacted her. She stood in the center of the new home, just where the hearth had been in the old cabin. The moment she crossed the spot, she felt it. The weight. She described it as being pressed between 2 thick walls of sound, not loud, but present. Like a hum you feel in your jaw. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the walls vibrated. The lights flickered. And beneath her feet, she heard knocking. 3. Then 2. Then 1. Then silence. Followed by a whisper so soft it could have been her own breath. He's closer now. Thermal footage from a new set of investigators showed a heat signature rising from the center of the Dowell home between 3:10 and 3:20 a.m. every night. No fire. No HVAC. Just a vertical plume of heat rising through solid floorboards, fading into nothing halfway to the ceiling like heat from an invisible hearth. One image on the 4th night showed a figure. Faint. Slumped. Head first. Inside the heat column. Like someone trying to crawl out. When a contractor cut into a wall to install additional plumbing, he found something horrifying. Behind the drywall was a small sealed chamber unmarked on any blueprint. Inside, a child's shoe singed, 2 fingernails, a brick blackened and warm to the touch, and drawn in ash over every surface. Spirals, each one slightly different, except for the last, larger than the rest, etched into the far wall with words beneath. Breath comes before fire. On the 6th night, the Dowells stopped using the monitor after the following incident. At 3:14 a.m., the screen flickered. The crib was empty, but their daughter was still there, sleeping. On the screen, though, the digital feed, the child had been replaced by a thin figure crouched at the foot of the crib. Long arms. No face. Its head was pressed against the mattress. And in the corner of the screen, the baby's voice said, "He's learning how to stand." That night, the Dowells fled the house. They never went back. But 1 week later, their daughter said something as she slept in a hotel bed, soft, almost musical. A hum, followed by words she'd never spoken before. It breathes at night. I told him your name. The house was abandoned again. The Dowells had left in a hurry, the kind of hurry where drawers are still open, dishes still in the sink, clothes still hanging in closets. The air inside was cold, not from the temperature, but from something else. Something emptied. Kate Maddux stood in the doorway, flashlight in one hand, recorder in the other. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. She'd watched this thing crawl from walls, from whispers, from the breath of bricks. She'd heard her brother scream inside dead audio. She'd seen his drawings surface in places he'd never been. It was time to look inside. Kate convinced a small independent forensics crew to join her, 2 specialists and a tech with radar gear. She showed them the thermal scans, the weird voice recordings, and the floor plans. They agreed to help cautiously. The goal, to locate the void beneath the house, the one surveyors had seen on scans. If there really was a space, a chimney that shouldn't be, they'd find it. They started from the basement crawl space. And very quickly, they found the flue shaft. It ran straight up into the house, about 9 feet tall, but there was no chimney above it. Just flooring. Drywall. No smoke vent. No fireplace. It was built into nothing. And inside? Smooth walls. Brick. Old. Lined with soot. No entry point. No exit. The tech lowered a high-lumen probe light into the shaft. At 8 feet deep, the light flickered. The temperature dropped 27 degrees. Then the probe hit something soft. The light swung. Focused. What it showed was a handprint. Not a stain. Not a burn. A handprint pressed into the inside wall. Fingers too long. No thumb. The next day, they returned with gear, a rope, headlamps, body cam. The tech volunteered to go in. He was small enough to fit, and the shaft was wide enough once you passed the top 3 feet. The team lowered him slowly. Kate watched on the monitor. At the 5-foot mark, bricks. Blackened. At the 7-foot mark, grooves in the mortar like something had crawled up and down too many times. Then, at 8 feet, the chamber widened. The walls became organic, not stone anymore. Pulsing. Breathing. And then the camera cut out. The tech didn't answer the radio. The rope trembled, but not from movement, from vibration, like a low rumble rising from the shaft. Then, 3 knocks echoed upward. Slow. Measured. And something began humming inside the walls. Kate nearly ran. But then the rope began to pull slow, like someone was climbing back. The tech emerged, shaking, eyes wide. He was covered in soot and something else. A black, sticky substance. And in his hand, a small, spiral-shaped carving made of old bone. He said only. He's still there. But he's wearing someone else now. The carving was analyzed. It wasn't wood. It was calcified marrow, human. Roughly 25 years old. Etched with symbols that didn't match any known language, but mirrored Joshua's final journal pages. Inside the spiral, someone had carved initials. 2 letters. L.K. Lucas Kessler. Kate stayed behind that night. She needed to see it alone. At 3:13 a.m., the house was silent. She placed her hand against the floor. Cold. No wind. No traffic. Then pressure. Like a heartbeat in the brick beneath. Then breathing. Not her own. And then, from somewhere deep below the floorboards, I still see you, Katie. Joshua's voice. Cracked. Dry. But him. She fell backward, trembling. And then the whisper came, not Joshua's. A different voice. Lower. Older. We never leave the flue. We were the ones who hear. Behind a utility panel, hidden by drywall, the forensics team found a sealed door, never logged in the plans. It led to a coal chute, long decommissioned, ending in a concrete wall. Or so they thought. The tech knocked on the back wall. It was hollow. They broke through. Inside, a brick-lined shaft, spiraling downward. The air was hot, but the bricks were wet. And on the walls, scorched black and glistening, were hundreds of fingernail scrapes, all circling in a slow spiral. And in the center, a name scratched in layers over and over, Joshua M. At the base of the shaft was a circular chamber. Walls curved inward. No corners. No exits. Just bricks. An air that felt thick, like water before a storm. In the center, something slumped. A figure, folded in a fetal position. Kate approached. It was a suit of clothing, Joshua's, perfectly preserved, pressed against the stone. Empty. No body. Just fabric. And written across the chest in ash, I let it in. As they climbed out, the forensics crew sealed the shaft with concrete. Kate placed the bone spiral at the bottom, whispered her brother's name, and left. That night, the team returned home. Only 2 made it through the week. The third, the tech who went down, was found in his apartment, curled in his bathtub. No wounds, no signs of trauma, just black soot in his lungs, and the word flu carved into the porcelain with a spoon. Kate never returned to the site, but some nights, when she lies awake and the house is too quiet, she presses her ear to the wall, and she hears it. Not a knock, not a whisper, just breathing from inside the bricks. Joshua had died in the chimney. That much was certain. But the deeper Kate looked, the more she understood a sickening truth. He hadn't died alone. Something had been with him, behind him, beside him, inside the bricks. And whatever it was, it hadn't stayed there. 3 weeks after sealing the spiral chamber beneath the house, the forensic team reviewed their final thermal footage one last time. In the video, just before the tech's camera went dark, the sensors caught a second heat signature. It wasn't the tech. It wasn't the bricks. It was a shape, hunched and tall, pressed flat against the flue wall, unmoving. Not warm, not cold, just present, like it had been waiting. The thermal shape looked like a figure, arms too long, legs bent the wrong way. And it had no head, just a ripple of heat, like steam rising from a mouth that wasn't there. Kate requested a second opinion on Joshua's remains, this time from a forensic anthropologist outside the state. What they found made no sense. His bones were compressed, not broken, like pressure had wrapped him inward, folding him without shattering. The marrow in several bones had crystallized, a phenomenon typically seen in extreme heat or atmospheric pressure loss. There were no signs of struggle, but the larynx was twisted, not crushed, as if something had reached into his throat and turned it like a key. The final report had a note in the margins. Not consistent with human trauma, possibly environmental or ritualistic. A researcher on the case proposed something chilling, that every chimney like this with the spiral markings, the hidden voids, was paired. Not just one flue, but 2. A mirror shaft always deeper than the one we see. And in that second shaft, something waits. Not a spirit, not a ghost. Something that grows in the walls, that moves between flues when the air is still, looking for listeners. And once it's heard, once you hear it, it follows, like breath drawn into lungs that aren't yours. One audio technician ran Joshua's final 911 call through advanced spectral analysis. Just as they'd done with cases like Elisa Lam, they found 2 waveforms. One was Joshua, erratic, panicked, human. The other, perfectly steady, low, inhumanly still. It didn't register as voice or breath, just presence. And layered beneath it, in a pattern matching a spiral, were syllables, spoken in reverse, over and over. Feed, replace, inhale, wear. Another experiment followed. A team extracted one of the surviving spiral-marked bricks from the sealed shaft. They placed it in a soundproof lab and subjected it to silence. No vibration, no sound, no interference. For 72 hours, it did nothing. But on the 73rd hour, a hum began, so low it barely registered. Then tapping, from inside the brick. 3 knocks, then a crack formed. Inside was dust, black, oily, and faintly warm, and written along the crack in etched, impossible script. He brought me air. On the 7th night, Kate dreamed she was back in the cabin, except the chimney was alive. Taller than the house, reaching endlessly upward into a sky that had no stars. Joshua stood beside it, but his face wasn't his. It was smooth, flat. His mouth a thin, crooked line, opening only when he turned to her and said, "He wasn't here for me." Then the chimney opened sideways like a wound and something stepped out. It wore her brother's clothes, but it moved backwards, and it hummed. A new family moved into a house a mile from the old cabin site. They had no idea what had happened, no reason to suspect, until their son, age 6, began drawing spirals on the windows. He said he dreamed of a long man who crawled through chimneys and asked for names. One morning, they found scratches along the inside of their bedroom wall, measured, even, not done with a tool, done with fingernails. And below the baseboard trim, etched into the floor, He's learning my voice. Kate received an anonymous email. No subject line, no body, just an attachment. A photo, dated and timestamped August 9th, 2013, 3:14 a.m. The night Joshua vanished. It was blurry, but the image showed Joshua's silhouette in front of the cabin, head turned, looking over his shoulder. Behind him, something thin, bending, flowing like smoke from the bricks. Its hand was pressed against the small of his back, and its other hand, pointing at the chimney. That night, Kate opened the last page of her brother's journal again. She had missed it before. A final sentence, written in ink so faint it looked like a shadow. I wasn't supposed to be the last. Then, on the wall beside her bed, the spiral appeared, drawn in soot, and underneath one word, listen. Kate hadn't dreamed in weeks. Not real dreams, not soft, slow ones with color and memory. Only static now. Heavy, gray noise, spirals in her vision when she blinked too fast. A pressure in the walls. And always the feeling that someone was watching her from the other side of the drywall. The voice came more frequently now. Not in nightmares, in silence. Whenever her house got too quiet, it breathed. An anonymous package arrived at her door. No name, no postage, just a cassette tape wrapped in newspaper, burned around the edges, labeled in shaky handwriting. Flu confession G. Hollow/Philip Gribble. She borrowed an old tape player from a neighbor. Hit play. Gribble's voice was thin, tired. If you're hearing this, I never made it out. I was wrong to think it could be sealed. It doesn't want to be sealed. That's not what the spiral means. It's not a warning. It's a map. We thought chimneys were built for smoke, but they were built for passage. Not by us, not first. Their mouths. And we've been feeding them the whole time. We go in, and it wears us. News reports began surfacing online. Unverified, Reddit threads, strange calls to police, children waking up in the middle of the night and speaking fluently in reverse. One girl, in Ohio, drew a spiral in crayon and said her new daddy was learning to breathe through bricks now. Another boy, in Arizona, was caught whispering into his family's fireplace. Not deep enough yet. Give me another name. Every incident occurred around 3:14 a.m. Each home had a chimney, and each child had never learned to draw a spiral before. Kate laid it out. 1986, Lucas disappears. A 1993, first official flu echo, recorded by local dispatch. 2008, Joshua vanishes. 2013, Joshua's body discovered. 2016 to 2021, cases explode across 4 states. Always near old hearths. Always involving children. Always spirals. 2025 now. They're no longer waiting to be heard. They're learning how to speak back. Gribble had said it best. The spiral doesn't open the flu. Listening does. She went back one last time. To the spot where the silent cabin once stood. The earth was different now. No grass. No weeds. Just a patch of soil, circular, like ash spread in a slow breath. She dug for hours. Her hands raw, blistered. And then her fingers scraped brick. Not like the old cabin's chimney. Newer. Still warm. Still pulsing. And then, as she knelt and pressed her ear to it, 3 knocks. She brought one thing with her, her recorder. She clicked it on, placed it beside the brick, waited. At 3:14 a.m., it picked up breathing, then humming, then Joshua's voice, but not like before, not scared, not dying, calm, hollow, echoing. I'm still here, Katie, but not just me. Then dozens of voices layered over each other. Children, men, women, each whispering the same phrase. We never left the flu. 3 days later, construction workers tearing down a condemned apartment in another state found a chimney wrapped in soot on the outside, like it had exhaled fire backward. Inside was no firebox, just an empty shaft, and shoes, all mismatched, all children's sizes, and one, near the base, bore a tag inside, J. Maddux, but the shoe was brand new, released last month. Joshua never wore it, but something wearing him had. Final incident report. A meteorological anomaly over Woodland Park, Colorado. Radar picked up a spiral cloud formation, stationary, unmoving, stretching across 2 counties. Inside the center, a heat plume vertical, rising through the atmosphere like smoke without fire. Aircraft were grounded. No official explanation given, but satellite imagery later showed something even stranger. Inside the spiral, just visible in infrared, a chimney-shaped void, thousands of feet tall, fading into cloud. Kate returned home. She hadn't spoken for days. She opened her brother's journal one last time. Every page was blank now, except one. Drawn in fresh ink she hadn't written. A new spiral, and beneath it, "We are in the walls now." That night, Kate lit a fire in her fireplace. She watched it burn. At 3:14 a.m., it turned blue, then still, and from behind her, in a voice made of air and ash, "Katie, can I come in?"